Good morning. My name is John Von Paris, and I am the chairman of the MDTA Finance and Administration Committee. I hereby call the meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee to order at 9 a.m. In accordance with the live streaming law, this meeting is being conducted via video conference and is being live streamed on the MDTA Finance and Administration Committee webpage. All members will have their video active during the entirety of the meeting. To minimize background noise during the call, I would ask that everyone on the line please mute your phones except when speaking. I ask that those who are presenting or answering a question to please turn your video and audio on when speaking. When you are done, please turn your video off and put your audio on mute. There are no members of the public, no elected officials, and no media who have pre-registered to comment at this morning's meeting. This time we will begin with agenda item number 1, the approval of the Finance Committee meeting from January 9th, 2025. Everyone had an opportunity to read. We have a motion. Is that Member Carroll? Was that you?
Member Carroll, yes.
Thank you. Okay, is there a second?
Member Ardinger, I'll second.
Thank you, Member Ardinger. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are hereby approved. We will move on to the next agenda item, number 2, contract number MT0211372, one call plumbing services for the Southern Region. And Carol Hicks is here to present. Good morning, Carol.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Again, I am Carol Hicks. I will be the contract manager for this particular contract, which is plumbing services for the Southern Region. And the MDTA Southern Region includes the facilities of the William Preston Lane Bay Bridge, the ICC and County Connector, and the Nice Bridge. Plumbing services will be for not only the basic plumbing work, but also preventive maintenance work, which is a little different for the contract for this particular point in time. And it will include all types of plumbing aspects, fixtures as we know it, those that are seen and unseen, those that you might see for drinking fountains, lavatories, kitchens, and also plumbing structures that relate to underground facilities or equipment systems that deal with sewer and water. I think, let's see here. That's the basic scope to repair and maintain equipment systems in accordance with local, state, and federal regulations. The estimate was $660,000. The contracting low bid was $529,800. The incumbent, low bidder, also the incumbent is Langan Mechanical. And there are no VSB goals on this contract. There were no protests, and MBE was not applicable. And I believe that's the basics of the contract. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
There, Member Ardinger, do you have a question? Okay. Any other comments or? Okay, okay, I'm looking around. I don't see any hands up.
Member Von Paris, just more so just in general for these type of write-offs, it would be good if we could note on there if the contractor is the incumbent, because that was going to be my question since their bid is so much lower, and making sure that they've done work with us previously.
I feel that's a very good suggestion. Yeah, it gives me comfort to know that when the bid is there's a difference like we see here. So, and I know that there's been a lot, I'm sure that the scope of services and everything have been reviewed, and but I think that's a very good suggestion, Member Rosen. Okay.
I do apologize if I did not say that, but the contractor is the incumbent. Yes.
No, you did. I just, just when we're reviewing the materials, because of the delta, that's the immediate question, and making sure that this was a contractor that had done work with us, but they have, and that gives me comfort with this bid.
Good. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Very well.
Okay. Thank you for your question. Is there a motion to advance this item to the full board?
So
for
move.
approval? Okay,
Member
thank
Rosen.
you, Member Rosen. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Member Carroll. Second, Member Carroll.
Thank you, Member Carroll. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This is, we'll advance. Mr. Hicks, thank you very much for being here, and thanks for your presentation this morning.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to the next item, number 3, and it's contract number MT 0211314 HVAC and ATC maintenance and repairs in northern MDTA facilities. And Sanders, or is Kathy Anderson?
Kathy.
Kathy.
Yes. Morning.
You're here. Good morning. Thanks for being here.
Sure. I'm presenting HVAC and ATAC maintenance repairs for northern MDTA facilities. This is our JFK and Hatton facilities. The contract includes maintenance, repair, and services, which will encompass a wide range of HVAC equipment, such as boilers, chillers, air handling units, cooling towers, and various control systems. It will also include work on our ATC systems, and it will also include monthly water treatment services at the facilities. The project was advertised on 11/6. The bids were received on 12/3. The low bid that was received was from Denver-Ell. Denver-Ell is our current vendor, and they actually cover all of our facilities right now with the exception of the Nice Bridge. So they are very familiar with these facilities. It's a 3-year contract with a 2-year renewal period. The NTP is anticipated on June 8th. Does anyone have any questions?
Excuse me, members, I wanted to provide a clarification. Denver-Ell is the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. There was another bidder with a similarly low bid that was rejected because their bid was not responsive and responsible. That's why you may see a firm on here, Greenfield Construction, with a slightly lower bid amount. And I wanted to provide that clarification for the members. Thank you. Sorry, Kathy.
Correct. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. Question on the, I guess the acronym ATC, is that automatic temperature control? Or is
Yes,
that
sir.
some other? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Alrighty. So that's all part of it. All right. Is there a motion to advance this item to the full board for approval?
Member Ardinger also move.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Member Rosen.
Rosen, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, members. And Kathy, thank you for your presentation this morning.
Absolutely. Everybody have a great day.
You too. Okay, we will move on to the next item, number 4, contract number J01B56000016. It's, I guess, VMware, David Goldsboro. And by the way, and this is software licensing, and this is Okay. Okay, we have, let's see. All right, very good. I was looking at something else here, but David, please welcome and go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Member Von Paris. Good morning. Also, good morning to members Ardinger, Carroll, and Rosen. Great to see everyone. Yes, you're correct, Member Von Paris. This is software for VMware, which stands for virtualization. So the purpose of this memorandum is to seek approval from the committee to present this contract at the next scheduled board meeting. There's a summary there to describe VMware. Essentially, it is software that runs all of the servers in the data center, both at the ICC and at the JFK. So anything that runs on our servers, which would be Maximo, our financial management system, our file shares, is all powered by VMware. It gives us a lot of fault tolerance, a lot of failover capabilities. If there are issues within the servers, VMware will move it around to maintain stability. From a comparative perspective, it is widely used in the state of Maryland. Several MDOT agencies use it, as well as state do it. So it is a product that has been tried and true for many years. We are looking at a 2-year term for $741,912. Given that the contract exceeds MDTA's delegated authority, we would need to take this to the next available Board of Public Works meeting for approval. And with that, Member Von Paris, be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any questions? Member Ardinger?
Thank you for that information. It sounds like it's a good move because it makes us more efficient, and it sounds like it allows us to progress. What will the implementation be like for this?
Great question, Member Ardinger. So the software, it runs actively on a daily basis. So this is strictly the renewal. So we would not have to go through any implementation. It simply is just truing up our renewal after for the next 2-year cycle. So we would not have to do anything.
Okay. And it looks like there's a significant difference between what the engineer's estimate was and what the actual cost is. Thoughts on that?
Usually it's because of the extended discounts that the company Broadcom would extend to the state of Maryland. Also, by doing a multi-year renewal, extended further discounts. So that's why the disparity. They probably are going off of retail pricing, and so we would get a discount for just 1 year and a deeper discount for 2 years.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, is there a motion to advance this item to the full board for approval?
So moved, Member Carroll.
Thank you, Member Carroll. Is there a second?
Member Ardinger, I'll second.
Thank you, Member Ardinger. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. David, thank you very much.
Thank you, Member
And also-
Von Paris.
I said,
Yes, sir.
also, I like the fact that you mentioned, and I think in the other prior approval that we had here this morning, one of the other items, we're saving energy, right?
Yes, sir.
I guess it's an energy saving.
It is. VM, that's a great point. VM is a low energy consumption product. It definitely, it throttles the power up and down as needed, which is something that's very attractive with the product. One of many features.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Member Von Paris.
Okay, we will move on to the next item, item number 5, an update on ESG, the ESG report. Deb Sharer is here to present. Good morning, Deb.
Good morning, members. I'm Deb Sharer, MDTA's Chief Financial Officer for the record. I'm happy to present MDTA's first environmental, social, and governance report, more commonly known as an ESG report. A factor in the MDTA tasking in the preparation of this report was to be proactive to address the financial market and credit rating agencies' interest in this area. The ESG topics can affect an organization's rating by one notch. And although MDTA has always been rated high in this area, it is something that we felt very strongly that we needed to be proactive with so that we can ensure continued strong rating in that area. The preparation of the report was a joint effort and included subject matter experts throughout our agency. MDTA also acquired consultant support through WSP. When preparing the report, the first thing we did was research and prioritization. We wanted to make sure we understood the areas that the credit rating agencies were interested in. There's multiple ESG frameworks for how the information can be reported. We've reviewed peer reports for comparison and did industry research. Next, we gathered stakeholders and started to develop content based on the framework that we chose. Interviews, subject matter experts, coupled with reviews from all levels of our organization were the next two tasks. After that, we started conducting a gap analysis. And this version of the ESG report, it largely captures everything that we've always been doing, but memorialized it in a single point of reference in this single report. And so, you know, we do have gaps, but like many other reports, you take it, you learn from it, it helps inform future decisions, and you grow from it. And that's our intentions here. In 2025, one of the key areas that we're going to focus on flushing out further is climate change impacts and greenhouse gas emissions, as well as looking and seeing if we can strengthen the data aggregation across the ESG topics that are included in this inaugural report. So at a high level, that's what we did and why we did it. Included in your material as an attachment is the inaugural report. I can highlight, you know, I can at a high level kind of skim through the report with you if you'd like, but I understand that the members had the report beforehand and therefore that may not be necessary.
Any reference from any members on that? Okay, member Arninger.
Well, I have a question. I don't know if this is a time that I could ask that. I just wanted to understand a little bit more with the ESG report and as we progress in time, because everything's changing very rapidly. With the ESG report, have our credit rating agencies that we're dealing with, is this one of the things that they've looked at in regards to rating? Or something we think they may?
No, they do. In their report that they issue to us, they have an ESG section of that report. But in the past, when they were evaluating us, it was based on our verbal discussions with them.
Okay.
And so in the very near future, early part of March, we will begin our credit surveillance. It's an annual surveillance of our rating. And during that process, we will ensure that they receive a copy of this report.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay.
Member Paris, the only thing I just mentioned more is I think this is, Deb, I think it was well done. I think it's a great job. As you mentioned, it's a start. It does kind of, codify is not the right word, but it documents what we've already been doing. And I think really shows our leadership, within the state for many of our efforts, within our control. So I think the team did a great job with this.
Thank you very much. We are sharing the report, sharing it with the department, sharing it with other levels of government. So, others may choose to begin this process as well. To the best of our knowledge, we are the only transportation agency that has done this thus far. It's on other agencies' lists of, to undertake.
I would add, no, Member Rosen, you've been an advocate of this for some time, and I think it was a well done report here. So, but yes.
No, just thank you. Like I said, we all know that you guys thoroughly review your materials beforehand. So for that reason, I won't walk through the report. I know everybody's already read it ahead of time.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
Deb, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Okay, we will move to item number 6, investment committee report, quarterly update on the investment of MDTA's funds. Alan Carmen and Clayton, I believe, will be presenting today. And this is the last approval item on the agenda this morning. So welcome, Alan and Clayton.
Thank you for your time this morning. We appreciate the opportunity to present to you this material. Before we dive in, I wanted to mention that in order to address member questions from prior meetings, we wanted to focus your attention on the last half of the presentation materials, unless, of course, there are any questions about anything before that. But very briefly on slide 2, the agency's portfolios remain fundamentally well diversified and in compliance with prescribed statutes, trust indenture stipulations, and all other guidelines and policies. The portfolio management process adheres to the relevant and appropriate strategies adopted and approved by the Finance Committee and the MDTA Board, and the investment philosophy prescribes a consistent approach even during periods of intermittent volatility. Moving to slide 10, if you will. Maybe I should ask if there are any questions on some of the slides before that. If not, again, moving on to slide 10, we should note that prevailing yields on the 2 total return accounts are just over 4%. Therefore, the probability over the next 4 years is that the annualized returns are greater than that. Again, just over 4%. But given mark-to-market requirements, these returns may be higher or they may be lower. And this would be due to conditions primarily related to changes in interest rates. A case in point is that for the general account, we should expect a return of just north of 4% over the next 4 years, given the prevailing interest rates. Indeed, you may recall from the prior quarterly report that the trailing 12-month return for the total return portfolios was just over 8% annualized. Contrast that with this period where the trailing 12-month return for the portfolios is less than 4%. Again, a function of the volatility of interest rates. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alan to discuss the remaining slides as they relate to these prior member questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, turning to slide 11, wanted to restate a question that was raised during the last quarterly meeting. And the question generally was based on our longer term benchmarks for these 2 reserves in the general account and the M&O, would even longer benchmark indices and strategies be appropriate or warranted for these reserves? And I think it's a subjective decision. There's no objective right answer for the amount of duration you would accept or volatility in a portfolio. But the investment committee generally believes that the recommended benchmark indices represent a reasonable and prudent compromise between our focus on long-term multi-year returns and our tolerance for single-year return volatility. And so I think these next slides will help explain that trade-off. On slide 11, there's a table and a graph, and that table is commonly, the graph is commonly referred to as a yield curve or the term structure of interest rates. And the one important element to observe is that the yield curve is returned to what's termed a normal positive slope, meaning that you receive higher yields for longer term securities. So when we're investing in longer term indices, they have higher weighted average yields, and that translates over time into higher returns. On slide 13, there are two graphs, a graph and a table. The top graph shows the two indices that we currently use. There's a 1 to 13 year index and a 1 to 5 year index. And what you see is that generally the 1 to 13 year index has a higher yield. We're graphing the yields here since 2000. And the 1 to 5 year index generally has a lower yield. And that's associated with the weighted average yields of the securities held in those indices. And that's similar to our portfolios as well. You'll observe there are a few instances where those lines cross, and those are indications that the yield curve is inverted, where you have this temporary phenomenon where long-term rates are slightly lower than short-term rates, as we had experienced in recent months, and that curve inversion has resolved with rates moving upward significantly. The lower table shows returns, and what can be gathered from this is to observe the green bars, which are the longer index, and to look for the number of years of negative returns. So you can see 4 obvious years of negative returns, which is demonstrating that that longer term index has more negative return years than the shorter term index. And you can also look at all the years of positive returns, and you'd notice that the magnitude of positive returns is much greater. So you're getting more positive returns or a magnitude of positive returns, but you're also accepting these much larger negative return years. On page 14, we have a lot of information here, and just to highlight a few key points is that the total return on an individual bond or on portfolio bonds is each month or each year is essentially your income return, which is the accruals from the coupon income, plus the price return, which is the mark to market. And so on a month to month basis, it's extremely volatile, and it's still quite volatile on an annual basis. Those longer term indices have higher weighted yields, but they generate much higher return volatility. So we would expect higher average annual returns over multi-year periods. But it's important to understand that that mark-to-market price volatility may exceed the accruals and result in years with negative returns. So there's some information I'd like to highlight on the table. And the table is essentially comparing shorter indices with slightly longer indices. And so the very top line is showing the 1 to 3 year agency index, and the next line is the 3 to 5 year agency index, and then we're comparing it to a 5 to 7 and a 7 to 10. And I've circled the annualized returns between 1998 and 2024 to illustrate really the trade-off between taking more duration risk and accepting volatility versus an annualized long-term return. And we chose this long period to really help demonstrate the trade-off. So you can see for the 1 to 3 year index, the annualized return is 2.9%. If you were to have a slightly longer portfolio and benchmark it against a 3 to 5 year index, the return is 3.75. For an even longer portfolio, like a 5 to 7 year benchmark, 4.37. The index that we've been utilizing for the general account, which is $350 million portfolio, is the very bottom index there. It's a blend of the 1 to 3 and the 3 to 5 year indices. And so the annualized return was 3.33% over that period since 2024 through 1998. The next column to the right of that is the negative return calendar years. And so if you look at the very bottom index, you can see that it had 3 negative return years in that period since 1998, including a couple of years, recent years. The column to the right of that is the maximum negative calendar year return. And so you can see that was 5.3%. If you were to invest the entire $400 million unrestricted cash position in that, we're trying to equate that to dollar terms. So that would be a negative return of 21 million in a particular calendar year. And I want to contrast that with the 7 to 10 year benchmark that's shown there. It has a effective duration of about 6.5, and the maximum number of negative return years, the negative return years are 5 years in that same period. So you can see it's experiencing more negative return years. And then if you look at the maximum negative return, it was 12%. So again, if the entire portfolio were invested in a similar duration index, on a dollar terms, that would represent a $49 million mark-to-market loss during that calendar year. So it gives you a sense of the trade-off in terms of return and negative returns. The very far right column is showing the return differentials over a 20-year period. So, for example, if you look at the very top index, the return was 2.9%. If you compared that to the index that we're using, the 1 to 5 year index, the very bottom indice, the difference in dollar terms is $62 million over a 20-year period. So at one time, this agency was utilizing a 1 to 3 year benchmark, and we've have gone to this longer term index for many years now. So that's the trade-off that we're accepting there, is that we're having, a bit more volatility, but we expect to generate higher returns. So that is the trade-off. If you were to compare that, say, to this 5 to 7 year index or the 7 to 10 year index, you can see you would, over a 20-year period, you would be generating a lot higher average annual returns, and that generates a lot of, additional income for the portfolio. But you can see that you could suffer, $50 million mark-to-market losses in a single year. I wanted to summarize that a bit in the last slide here, slide 15, is that this trade-off is driven by our considerations and ability to weather through that volatility. It's helpful to understand that the $400 million unrestricted cash position, we don't expect to have cash flow needs for that money, but the income generated from the portfolio ultimately flows to the capital account. In any years where we had short-term mark-to-market price declines that exceeded our income accruals, we would need to replenish these reserves to maintain the size of the reserve. As a reminder, the $400 million reserve is in our debt policy. It's a board-adopted policy, and it's critically important for maintaining our credit ratings. The rating agencies expect you to have a reserve that's equal essentially to your annual operating budget. So if you understand that we need to replenish that reserve in years when we had a big mark-to-market loss, it gives you some sense of that compromise, that the balance that we're trying to strike is that how much would we be willing to pull out of essentially annual operating revenues to replenish this reserve. But it's important also to understand that in years where you had subsequent mark-to-market gains or just generally positive investment returns, the money would flow back to capital. One critical consideration is that if you had a year of, substantial mark-to-market loss like we did in 2022, you would need to replenish that those reserves, and that would effectively draw money out of net operating revenues or indirectly draw money away from capital. And if you had a financing need in that particular year, that could help accelerate that financing need or increase your financing need, which is not a great or ideal time. Is that if you had a period of rising rates, you would be experiencing mark-to-market price declines in the portfolio, and at the same time you may have to go out and borrow or finance a larger portion of the capital program just as rates are rising. So I think in summary, we believe that the chosen benchmark indices represent a reasonable and prudent compromise between our long-term and multi-year return focus and then our tolerance for single-year volatility. And I'd love to open it up to questions now.
Alan, this is Deb first. Member Von Paris, if you would just indulge me for a second. First, Alan, I thought you did an excellent job explaining this. And you'll notice on our benchmarks is slightly longer for the M&O reserve because that's the $50 million reserve. The general is the 350. So we extended the duration for the M&O because with that only being 50 million, we're better able to manage the mark-to-market risk. Whereas the managing that for the 350, and as Alan said, the possibility of having to go to market to sell bonds to make up the loss in a rising rate environment, would be very undesirable. Now, happy to, Alan or myself to answer any questions.
Okay. Are there any questions, any board members?
Yep. So Alan, first of all, great. I agree with Deb. Great explanation, and it makes sense. And I can, we can really see from this chart how the juice is worth the squeeze going from 3 to 5, 5 to 7, even 5 to 7 to 7 to 10, but certainly not going further out to the 10 to 15. What I know our target is about 7 years duration for the M&O reserve. What is our current duration? Is it about 7 now?
Yeah, so for the M&O reserve and for, I think that the table on page 15 shows the benchmark indices. So for the general account, we're using that 1 to 5 year blended index. So the duration is approximately 3. It's about 2.7 most months. And so the benchmark indices move up and down very slightly based on issuance. And we, attempt to keep the portfolio locked in on those indices. So we're, close to 100% of the index most months, kind of ranging around, 95 to 103%. And the M&O reserve, our portfolio, as a reminder, is staggered maturities from 1 to 15 years. We use a STRIPS index, which is really the best index that we could find, which it's a zero coupon bond index. So that's why we're using only 1 to 13 years. So that index has a duration of approximately 7.
And,
so
we're hitting that benchmark.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
we are. Okay, good.
We're not apt to time the market. We don't, philosophically believe that we can predict where rates are headed. And last quarter, we highlighted that, the market had this, big interest rate decline up to September, anticipating these Fed cuts that were coming. The Fed was really telegraphing it, and rates fell significantly. And so if we were an active, strategy, we would have been, lengthening duration, but we're not. So we kept our durations for those two portfolios, consistent with the benchmarks. And it was interesting. What happened was that, rates suddenly rose 100 basis points, after September when the Fed was in the midst of cutting. And so it was very surprising, I think, for market participants. And it's a good illustration about, how difficult it is to time the market. Here the market was anticipating a decline in rates, and then rates ended up rising quite materially. So, and that's, what Clayton was highlighting is that we had this 8% return for those two portfolios through September. And then a quarter later, it's, because of the mark-to-market declines, it's corrected down to 3.5%. So that's the kind of volatility we're experiencing. So we're keeping the benchmark or the portfolio durations aligned with those indices and not trying to take slightly longer, shorter positions based on forecasts for rate changes.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay.
The last item is always that we're requesting, the investment committee is requesting of the finance committee a recommendation to move forward to the full board for approval of the continuation of the investment strategies and benchmarks for these two longer term reserves.
Okay, thank you. Just want to comment and say thank you for, I know this was a board member's question. They had a question about this, and I know you did your research and got back to the committee. I think it came from the last December meeting, finance committee meeting, and I appreciate the follow-up and the very thorough explanation. And I think it demonstrates that it's a good relationship between the board and the management team. So I think that's a positive experience. So thank you for doing that, Alan, and thank you both Clayton and Alan for your presentation. We will any other comments from any board members? Okay. All right. Well, we will seek a motion to advance this to the. I will go. I guess we'll go with concurrence, but also the recommendation. Is there a recommendation to move this item to the full board for approval of the continuation of the investment strategy / benchmarks? Is there a motion?
So move, Member Rosen.
Thank you, Member Rosen. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Member Carroll.
Thank you, Member Carroll. Is there any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, board members, and thank you, Alan and Clayton, for your presentation. We will move on to the next item. It's an update. Item number 7 is an update fiscal year 2026 preliminary operating budget and DBM rate changes. Jeffrey Brown is here. Hi, Jeffrey. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Morning.
For the record, my name is Jeffrey Brown, Budget Director for the MDTA. Up front, I need to apologize. I have found late some typos, which somehow I missed, but I will call them out as I walk through this presentation and the next one to avoid any confusion. So I apologize up front. So the review that we're doing today is the DBM rate changes, just to kind of jog everybody's memory. Typically, when we do the preliminary budget, we complete it in around November of the year, and DBM subsequent to those times come up with updated fringe rates that they provide us. So it's after the preliminary approval of the budget. So I'm here to report the effect of those changes today. So as of today, the DBM rate changes result in an increase. This is a typo I was talking about. I think your materials call it a decrease. It is an increase from 450 to 450.5 million. The changes are as follows. The law enforcement pension plan increased from 46 to 47.03%, which resulted in a $519,000 increase. The employee retirement systems increased from 21.54 to 21.87, which results in a $283,000 increase. The Social Security increased, and here you can see it says 2.7, which is incorrect. It's 7.37% to 7.38%, which resulted in a $14,000 increase. And finally, workers' compensation, which is derived from activity from DBM, that decreased approximately $230,000. So the net impact was a $586,000 increase for the fiscal year 2026 budget. That concludes my presentation on the DBM rates. I'm happy to take any questions.
And Member Rosen, did you have a question? Anyone? Okay. I know on the initially you mentioned the a change when you first started on I guess we'll get that will be updated before the other material is sent back out, I guess, right?
Correct. They've already been corrected and they will be sent
Okay.
out when we send them to the board. Yep.
All right. Okay. Is there anything else that Jeffrey you want to add on today?
Nope. No,
Okay.
that should be good.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. And if there's no more questions, we'll move on to the next item. Thank you, Jeffrey.
And moving on to the next item, this is our typical quarterly review. This is the fiscal 2025 review for the second quarter. As of December 31st, 2024, 37% of the budget has spent compared to a budget of 49%, except for personnel expenses, which were on budget. All objects were below budget. And again, this is somewhat typical for this time of year. As we said, we have a lot of activity, and you'll hear me comment on that. That occurs typically towards the latter half of the year in the third and fourth quarter when we pick up a bunch more expenses. Moving into some of the detail, the salary and wages budget, we're at targeted spending levels with a 47% spend rate. Communications Object 3 is below budget with a 12% spend rate. This is due to the state radio invoice, which is Object 305, that has not been paid yet. And this is typical. This will bring this object back close to budget. Travel Object 4 is below budget with a 20% spend rate. This is due to typical seasonality of travel with more activity occurring in the third and fourth quarters. So we don't see any risk or opportunity at this point. Fuel and utilities, Object 6 is slightly below budget with a 39% spend, and this is primarily to underspending in fuel oil and natural gas. We do expect an uptick as we go through the winter months. Motor vehicles, vehicle operations and maintenance, Object 7 is close to budget with a 42% spend rate. The main variances are vehicle gas and oil, Object 702, which is below budget with a 22% spend. Again, this is an easing of gas prices compared to the budget assumptions. Vehicle maintenance and repair is slightly below budget with a 42% spend, and all other objects are within the budget guidelines. Contractual service, Object 8 is below budget with a 24% spend rate. Key drivers are really advertising, engineering, and education, and then finally other. They're all kind of the same explanations, which is the typical timing and seasonality when the activity occurs. And while IT expenses are lumpy depending on when the invoices come through, and management studies are kind of in the same vein. So moving into advertising, we can see it's an 11% spend rate. We do expect an uptick in activity in the third and fourth quarters. Engineering is below budget with a 30% spend rate. Typically more activity occurs with engineering activities in the third and fourth quarter. And equipment repairs and maintenance is below budget with a 2% spend. This is due to the time for payment of our backup system invoice. This is an IT invoice, and that's expected to come through the next quarter, and that'll bring us back closer to budget. Building repairs and maintenance is below budget with a 8% spend rate. Mainly this is due to the fiscal year-end accounting associated with the Key Bridge collapse. Due to accounting rules, we put insurance proceeds against these expenses. So that's what's driving the expenses down. And I'll note that this is the one other typo I was talking about. It says a negative balance that should say a reduced balance because there is a positive balance. Education and training is below budget with a 29% spend. This is due to normal seasonality of when we have education and training courses occur. Medical care is at 24%. We do expect an uptick as we fill vacancies. Management studies is at 15% spend, which is below budget. Again, this is dependent on when these studies occur, and we expect additional activity in the third and fourth quarter. Security services below with a 32% spend rate, but that's reasonably close to budget, while fiscal services is close to a budget with a 41% spend rate. Finally, Easy Pass Service Center costs is below budget with a 14% spend, but we do anticipate this ultimately coming back to budget. And then other contractual services is at a 27% spend, which is below budget. Moving on to Object 9, which is supplies and materials. It's below budget with a 32% spend. Again, heavy on the seasonality and the timing. The roadway maintenance, which is Object 905, is below budget with a 28% spend, and that's the timing of when the activities occur. Salt is close to 0%. Again, that's, we've had some weather. We will expect to see some activity there. The next two, uniforms and ammunition, are very lumpy. It's kind of difficult to predict these costs, but right now for uniforms is at 36%, and this is driven when the orders are received, and these sometimes we do get orders very late. It's hard to predict when they will come in. Same thing with the ammunition, which is over budget with an 84% spend. We have received orders from prior years occurring in fiscal 2025. So I don't think there's a risk at this point, but that's something we're keeping our eye on. And finally, transponders is close to budget with a 40% spend. Object 10, replacement equipment, is below budget with 19% spend, primarily to Object 1099, which is below. And that's depending on when we receive orders for the equipment. This is expected to come back to budget. Additional equipment is below budget with a 24% spend. Again, due to timing, again, we don't see any opportunity there. It should come back to budget. And finally, fixed costs is below budget with a 25% spend. We are still expecting to see the property invoice and liability insurances invoices to come through. They were expected in the second quarter. It looks like they're going to hit in the third quarter. This does have the potential to be a risk of about $2.4 million. Overall, we do expect any risks to be covered in underspending in other areas. So at this time, we don't foresee any true risks or opportunities at this point. We do expect to be close to budget. Again, just to recap, we're at a 37% spend compared to a budget target of 49%. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you. Thank you. Member Ordinger?
Yeah, back to the building, road repairs and maintenance. I understand that number's, I'm going to use the word distorted because of the netting of the insurance proceeds. If you wouldn't factor in the insurance proceeds, what would be the spend of that item?
I'd have to get back to you. I don't know that right offhand. I have to go look and see what the actual total amount was and back that out. And, I'd have to get back to you to what the actual amount would be then.
Okay, if you could do that, and then what the overall number would be to your spend. Thank you.
Okay, so I will back out the.
Yeah. As of December 31st, it was 25 million.
Okay, so what is that percentage wise? Do you know?
So if I back out 25 million from the actual spend right now, give me a second here.
No, add it.
I'm sorry. Yes, add it. Yeah, we'd be at about 40. Well, our spend would be 186.9 million versus 161.9, and we'd be at 43% of budget in total. This is the total amount, so that would be actually essentially on budget in total.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That's all I have unless there's any other questions.
Okay, thank you. See, the energy costs are up like 40% I'm sure that'll continue to climb.
Right.
Okay. I'll see any other more questions. So thank you again. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll go to item number 9, an update on the second quarter budget comparisons, review of actual versus projected spending for the fiscal year 2025 capital budget. Jennifer Stump is here to present. Good morning, Jennifer.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Jennifer Stump, the Assistant Capital Program Manager. Today, I'm presenting the second quarter review of the fiscal year 2025 capital budget versus the actual spending as outlined in the fiscal year 25 to 30 draft CTP. This information will also be presented to the full board on February 27th. As of December 31st, 22.7% of the fiscal year 25 $809.8 million budget was spent as compared to the targeted spending level of 50%. Actual spending through the second quarter was $183.4 million. 27 of the 91 projects budgeted in fiscal year 2025 were within the acceptable spending limits of 25 to 75%, a plus or minus 25% of that 50% target. Due to normal lags in invoicing, generally 2 months, a plus or minus 25% threshold is determined to be reasonable. Attachment A details 10 projects that were budgeted with the highest fiscal year 2025 budgets. Actual spending through the second quarter on those 10 projects was $126.5 million. Overall spending in fiscal year 2025 remained low through the second quarter due to invoicing delays related to the Key Bridge rebuild. The receipt and processing of those delayed invoices will increase the capital program spending rate for the remainder of fiscal year 2025. 2 I-95 Express Toll Lane northbound extension projects are entering the construction phase with spending set to ramp up this spring. This concludes the quarterly update. Please let me know if there's any questions or concerns.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Member Artinger?
Yes, specific to the Key Bridge rebuild, because that, of course, is going to be our largest capital project. 3.3 million. I'm assuming that reflects the contracts that we've approved to date. Is that correct? Or is that
I would have,
yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, finish clarifying, I apologize.
Well, now, as I'm thinking this through, that probably doesn't reflect the contracts because we haven't spent the money yet. It's just the 3.3. It would just be helpful if we could have a breakdown, since it's such a large amount of money, of, what's in the pipeline, what the money's been spent on, and what's coming. I don't know if that's possible.
I will check and get back to you to let you know. I know a little bit of it is that the interim GEC is utilizing the state highway contracts. So a lot of work is being performed and through them first, and we're waiting for them to invoice us back. And that hasn't happened as expediently as we thought it would.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Good question. I think how it all fits together, would be important to know. So thank you as it relates to the Key Bridge. All right. Good question, Member Artinger. Any other questions, comments? Okay. We will move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will move on to the last item on the agenda. Is an update of quarterly update on traffic and revenue. And we have Walt Lon is filling in for Cheryl today, and I'm sure Walt has it covered today, right? Walt, are you there?
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me?
You sure can. I can.
Yeah, so for the record, I'm Walter Lawn. I'm the revenue manager with MDTA, and I'm, like you said, I'm standing in for Cheryl Lewis-Orr today to provide an update to the MDTA Finance and Administration Committee with a quarterly and year-to-date update regarding traffic and toll revenue trends compared to the previous year and the forecast. So essentially, the key takeaways are that our actual collected revenue was below forecast by 2.2 million for the period ended December 31st, 2024. And also during December 2024, there was about 3.3 million of transaction processing that was delayed, which we'll see in the table below. So if you can move down to page 2. So as shown in this table above, for the period ended December 31st, 2024, year-to-date system-wide transactions totaled 79.2 million, and corresponding collected revenue totaled 380.2 million. This represents a decrease of 2.5 million transactions, or 3%, compared to the same period last year, and year-to-date revenue decreased by 24.8 million, or 6.1%, compared to the same period last year. These variations are a result of timing of backlog or back office processing, the tapering of collections, and the loss of revenue resulting from the collision of the MV Dolly with the Francis Scott Key Bridge. And for the period ended December 31st, 2024, actual revenue was below forecast by 2.2 million. And this is mainly due to transaction processing delay of approximately 3.3 million. And essentially, had these been processed timely, we would have been exceeding the forecast by 1.1 million. If you scroll down to page 3, attachment A, you'll just see a breakdown of the Easy Pass and then the video admin pay by plate, the forecast versus actual, which brings you to the unadjusted difference, which that's what's actually was posted during the month. And then the timing differences we mentioned up above. For Easy Pass, it was about $2.3 million. And that's essentially all that was, is it was about a day, a little more than a day's worth of transactions that was put on pause, and then it was processed on January 1st. So just a day later. And the timing difference for the video admin and pay by plate is due to a CCU file processing delay. So typically we process one CCU file per month. And what that means is that they process whatever CCU collects during the month, they send a file over, we post it, and essentially it applies the payments received from the collections. So again, that was just processed late, so it's added in here as a timing. All right, so if we go down to attachment B, this is, again, is breaking down the revenue by category, the actual revenue, and then kind of showing that detail we talked about above with the timing differences in the middle of the page. And if you go down to attachment C, now this is kind of a breakdown of the variance to the forecast. So of the 1.1 million that we would have been above, 3.1 million we were under for Easy Pass due to the alley average traffic being lower than forecasted. Pay by plate was slightly above forecast. Video toll slightly below, and the biggest item of this is the administrative toll revenue being higher than forecasted by about 5.4 million, and pretty much all that is from CCU collections of civil penalty fees. We're about like if compared to the same time period last year, CCUs collected $5 million more than they did last year, which is a result of us now being kind of caught up and having everything sent over to collections to be able to be processed. That's really all I've got for you. Guess I'll leave it if you have any questions. I think you might be on mute, Member Von Paris.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Apologize. I have a question regarding the matter relating to processing, the billing processing delays. Is that internal, external, both, or just, and is there a strategy to take corrective action on that?
Yeah, it was just an issue with the lane, and it was only delayed by like 3 days. But the problem was it just happened to be at the very end of December. So they turned it off for like 2 days and then turned it on, and we just didn't catch up until the 1st of January. So it's nothing that we anticipate continuing. It was just like a one-time thing. And for the CCU statement files, they typically will process one per month. I'm not sure the exact details on why that got delayed, but it's in there now.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions from any members? Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Yep, no problem.
And, take care. All right. Well, looks like we've covered everything on the agenda except the last item, which is the vote to adjourn. So, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Member Carroll.
Thank you, Member Carroll. Is there a second?
Member Artinger, I'll second.
All right. Thank you, Member Artinger. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And I just want to thank everyone for their participation today. And I think it was a good meeting, a lot of material here. And again, I mentioned about the the comments being followed up on is very important. It shows a lot of respect. And I appreciate that from the team. So thank you all, and you have a great day.